Imagine yourself, you're in a critical team meeting, and a colleague enthusiastically pitches a bold, brand new creative idea. Immediately, your mind categorizes it. Immediately, your mind goes somewhere. Perhaps you say, that's an innovative idea. Or maybe you judge a little bit and say, you know what, that seems to be overly idealistic. Or maybe you go to a place where you're cautiously plausible in terms of that could work. Or you kind of just dismiss it and you say, you know what, that's outright naive. Your immediate perception can shape your reaction and drastically impact the relationship with yourself and the others in the room. This moment reveals your default mindset. Cynicism, skepticism, optimism, and dreaming, it sets the tone for your interactions. Today's podcast is about mindsets. What do you do when something happens out there? And what's amazing about mindsets is that you're not immediately in control of what your mind does. Your upbringing, your relationship history, your gifts that you were given, your genetic gifts and your imagination all come together. And they create that mindset. So I want to draw on my iPad a drawing here that looks like this. So I'm going to draw a straight line again. This line represents a continuum from one end to the next. Let's check it out and find out where you fall on this continuum in terms of what your mind automatically does and how it helps you make sense out of something that just happened. So let's start off with kind of a negative direction of this. So at one end of the spectrum, we have the cynical mind. The cynic. Certainly a word I don't have to operationally define, but we're going to have fun with it nonetheless. A cynic is a mind that's distrusting and suspicious. If you think about the proverbial glass, it says the glass is usually nearly empty all the time. It anticipates the worst. It usually processes information in a negative way, and it's kind of an interesting phenomenon because it's a shield against disapproval and hurt. If you reject something automatically, it's not going to touch you. Here's the thing about the cynical mind. It's not always wrong. And what's fascinating about that is in behavioral psychology, we call it intermittent variable schedule of reinforcement, fancy terms for when you're right now and again, you're going to get rewarded. Think about going to Vegas, putting money into the slots, pulling the lever, nothing happens. But you hear in the background all this wonderful noise. You hear the noise of other people winning, so you know that your turn is coming up. So you put another quarter in, another quarter, and another quarter. And then you hit a little jackpot. Now, you may have put $30 in and got $15 back, so you're still behind and the house always wins. But on an intermittent variable schedule, they rewarded you for playing. You're hooked. You might spend the rest of the day there. That's the power of intermittent variable reinforcement. And that same phenomenon happens with a cynical mind. When the cynical mind is right now and again, it kind of feels like it hits a jackpot. And that's enough reinforcement, enough reward, if you will, for it to go back and always look through a lens of bleakness. No, it's likely never going to happen, never has, and it really never does. So we just push that to the side. So if your mindset is one that moves in the direction of cynicism, probably something that needs some work. As a leader, cynicism could certainly get you into trouble kind of being a negative Nelly. People will stop bringing ideas to you. Let's go back to this continuum and ask ourselves, what's just adjacent to the cynic? And that's the skeptic. A skeptic is different than a cynic. A skeptic is kind of a scientific mind. It's one that's curiously cautious. It's one that believes that, okay, the glass, is it half full or half empty? I need proof either way. There's the skeptic, always looking for evidence, being very evidentiary, always questioning and investigating and learning. Really, what a healthy mindset that is. It values evidence and reason. So being skeptical can be a very healthy mindset. However, if you're always a skeptic, then you can imagine how other people might experience you. Again, although you don't have that same enriched connection with negativity, you still don't jump for joy when someone brings an idea to you. You might hem and haw. You might consider the idea, but no one thinks that you're playing with the idea. Because from the perception of other people, a skeptic is a person who's not playful. Now, I'm not saying stop being a skeptic. I'm not saying at all. I'm here to tell you that skepticism protects you from deception, but sometimes it creates barriers. So we know that we don't want to be fooled, and it's really healthy to be skeptical and look for more evidence. Only connect the dots when you have enough dots in front of you. But you have to realize sometimes you have enough dots in front of you. Sometimes there comes a time when you have to stop asking for more dots. Because when you keep asking for more dots and more dots and more dots, other people experience that as a barrier, a disconnection. There's the cynic, and there's the skeptic. Going back to our human perception spectrum, we're going to step into the third area, and that's the optimist. Being optimistic. Boy, that sounds great. Kind of like there's always a sunlit pathway to positivity. Every challenge is an opportunity. You probably know such individuals. And they lead with positivity. They lead with affirmations. They believe in what's perhaps not believable. To them, the glass is always full. Of course, they would say. Why would it be any other way? Optimists carry around a hopeful outlook. It's linked to resilience. Let's keep going. Something is bound to happen. Something good's bound to happen. They provide a kind of a supportive atmosphere. It feels good to be around an optimist. But just like when I said the skeptic, I said the cynic isn't always wrong. The optimist isn't always right. So just as a cynic sometimes gets drawn into the pervasiveness of negativity, an optimist sometimes can be drawn towards this never, never land. They're not always right. So if you think about a team, you have one person who's an optimist, another person who's a skeptic, probably a pretty great dance. Now think about another team, a duo, if you will. One person's optimistic and another person's a cynic. Things probably aren't going to work as well and as fluid as you want them to be. But before we start talking about team complexities, let's add one more item to this human perception spectrum. Because remember, these are mindsets. This is where your mind goes to make sense out of something immediately. It's not a well-constructed thought process. It's a reflex. It's a mindset. So we have a cynic, we have a skeptic, we have an optimist, and the last one on this spectrum, I call it the dreamer. These are perhaps the stargazers, if you will. They thrive on imagination and creativity, and they always are moving in the direction of a vision. I love that word, by the way. When I work with individuals who are stuck in now, or maybe they're stuck in a past that continues to repeat itself, I say, let's look at time. So there's the past that keeps revisiting that you don't want it to. There's your present. You feel stuck. You don't know what to do. And then there's your future. Maybe it doesn't look overly promising. What's beyond the future? And I say, a vision. If you can envision something, you're increasing the odds of stepping into your future and something good may happen. Now, it's not promised, but that's the power of a vision. So dreamers are visionaries. Their glass is forever overflowing. They inspire innovation. But the downside is they may be detached from reality. They may be wanting to do something that's just not achievable. Maybe it's not even fiscally prudent. So sometimes these dreamers have to be pulled back in. So if you have a dreamer mindset, just be aware of the magnificent possibilities that exist in your mind. You also have to be aware of how your dreaming mentality is impacting other team players. So we have a cynic, a skeptic, an optimist, a dreamer. If we go back to the proverbial glass, the cynic we know is the glass is usually nearly empty. The skeptic could be full, half empty, I need proof. The optimist says the glass is always half full, of course. And finally, the dreamer says the glass is forever overflowing. I like that metaphor because it really allows you an opportunity to gain perspective in real time. When something happens and you judge it, your mindset activates, it makes sense out of what's going on. Just look at the glass and ask yourself, am I right? Is there something else that I need? Before I make up my mind, why don't I just keep an open mind, be a little bit more curious, maybe ask a probing question or two, and join the other person's mind and see what might happen. So picture a scenario. You're in a new company and there's this initiative that's being broken out and it's promising transformative change. Everyone's really excited. Now imagine that you're the leader. Imagine that you are a cynical leader. Imagine what you would do, the cynical mind would do in the moment when everyone seems to be really buzzing, really excited about this initiative, almost like can't wait for it. Cynical mind might dismiss pieces or parts of it. They might look at it as it's inevitably going to fail. But if you do that, you're potentially missing valuable opportunities. So pause, reflect, and explore. Not only what's going on inside of you and be aware of your cynicism, because it's not always wrong. Let's then take that same positivity that's in the room and your leadership skills is your reputation is well-deserved as a skeptic. You need clear evidence. That's been demonstrated. You like to balance information and proceed cautiously. But beware, because your cautious style may lead to slow decision-making. And that slow decision-making may have an unfavorable impact on the team and also on the execution of this transformative initiative. It might slow things down. It might take the fun right out of it. Now, imagine you're an optimistic leader. You're enthusiastic when this initiative gets broken out. You have a reputation of being a cheerleader, and you're motivating others very, very naturally. But also, the downside of that is you might possibly overlook real risks. In which case, look around at your team, find out a person who's your favorite skeptic, join minds with that individual, take your optimism with the skepticism. I think that's just a really healthy duo, and see what comes up. Challenge the skeptic, have that skeptic challenge your optimism. Now, if you're a dreamer, If you're a leader who envisions possibilities and groundbreaking opportunities, that clearly can be inspiring. You're not in your position because of an errors that you made. It's likely there's a draw to your energy. There's something very inspiring about it. But there's a possibility that what you propose or what you're thinking may not be practical, at least not practical enough for implementation. So those are the people who are the idea makers. And idea makers are amazing, but they also need people who can execute. So we have to kind of like rein it in sometimes, have a great idea, but then ask people to challenge your great idea, not to bring you down, not to poke holes in it, but just to challenge the reality-basedness of your enthusiasm. So here's my call to action. Today, I want to encourage you to be more curious about your default mind. When something happens and your mind does exactly what it's supposed to do, I want you to pause, reflect, and explore what's going on. Look at the glass. Is it usually nearly empty? Half full, half empty? Show me more proof. Is it always half full? Of course it is. Or is it like overflowing with positivity? I want you to practice intentionally shifting your mindset. And the best way to intentionally shift your mindset is to ask other people for feedback, is to ask other people who are on the spectrum, so to speak, to gain greater situational awareness so you can have balance. I want you to find a way to balance healthy skepticism with visionary thinking. I want you to take optimism and join hands with that practical realism. And that gives us not only both feet on the ground, but it allows us to keep our head in the clouds. And that's a great place to be. So by intentionally navigating this prism of mindsets, you gain a broad perspective and you get more control over what's happening. Again, going back, it's about pausing, reflecting, and exploring what your mind has a tendency to do. Look at your glass and ask yourself, how do I find balance? You find balance by accessing your relationship intelligence, turning conflict into connection, promoting healthy conversations, asking people to challenge you. Have them poke holes in your logic. Have them poke holes in your enthusiasm. But by doing so, you're building stronger, healthier connections.